Alright, everybody, G Funk here, and I'm back, and I have a question for you. Where were you at on this date 25 years ago? I tell you where I was at. I was watching this right here. Oh my gosh. I can't believe that I'm actually sitting here talking about a fight that I had watched 25 years ago. Man, time flies, But, this fight here was definitely one that sticks out in my mind. Growing up, I had just started to really get into boxing around this time. The very first fight that I remember really sitting down and watching was Leonard versus Hearns, the rematch. I believe that was in like '89. I remember watching that fight. And a few others in between, but this one definitely sticks out in my mind because, Iron Mike Tyson, man, the guy got knocked out cold by James Buster Douglas in the biggest upset in boxing history. The guy was 42-1 underdog. Just imagine that, 42-1. If you just dropped $100 on James Buster Douglas to win the fight. Really, if you're a gambler, what is $100 to you, You figure, throw $100 down on Douglas, you never know. And bang, the guy ends up winning, and not only does he win, but he wins by knockout. Unbelievable. But, like I said, this is one of the first fights I remember watching when I was first getting into the sport. Growing up during the 80s and the 90s, I was a huge wrestling fan, pro wrestling that is. WWF was the big thing then, and, when I seen boxing, it looked just like wrestling, You got a ring, you got ropes, you got two big guys fighting in the ring, you got a referee. Just a little bit different, not the, all the dramatic stuff like in pro wrestling, but, it was similar in ways. It caught my attention as a young kid, and I was up late last night and I saw that the fight was coming on. They were showing it again on ESPN, so ended up taping it and watching it, and man, oh man, let me tell you, Buster Douglas, man, the guy really did control that fight. Pretty much the whole entire fight. He was outclassing Tyson. And, to be honest, to be fair to Tyson, Tyson didn't really look like he was all there to me. Didn't look like the same guy that you had seen in prior fights leading up to this fight. But, hey, that's on him. You can't take anybody lightly in this sport, and, I believe that's what happened to him here. I believe that he ended up getting dropped in sparring leading up to this fight, in training camp for this fight, actually. And his corner was all messed up. If you go back and watch the fight, the guys had like a rubber glove full of ice water, and they were putting it over his swollen eye, during the mid-rounds. It was it's just a mess for Tyson that night. Everything that went wrong could have went wrong for him, and everything went right for Buster Douglas, But from what I had seen from the fight, I watched it several times in my life, over the years, but I hadn't watched it in quite some time until, just the other day, or yesterday, I should say, when it came on TV. And I gotta say, man, Douglas, he did put on one hell of a performance, man. he was controlling the ring, using his height and his size against Tyson. He really did bully the guy around. There was times where he would land his jab, and when Tyson would try to do that that bob and weave that he does very well, Douglas would smother him and muscle him around, push him off, use his size on Tyson. Tyson was, as bad as he was back then, and believe me, he was a bad man back then. He wasn't the biggest heavyweight out there, really small for the heavyweight division, but lightning quick with the hooks. The uppercuts were just phenomenal from Tyson back then. But like I said, he wasn't the biggest guy, so Buster Douglas did bully him around, and he really did have no fear of Tyson. You could just see it by the way he fought. I mean, he didn't care. I mean, he was not afraid of Tyson, and that was one thing that Tyson had going for him in a lot of his fights, was that, you know, that intimidation factor was key for him. Guys would just be terrified, you know, before the bell even rang, and then they're already beat, you know, in the head, you know, already before the bell even sounds. So you know, plus Buster Douglas at the time, you know, had a lot going on in his life. His mother had just passed away. I mean, less than a month before the fight. You know, the guy had really just so much on his mind, and he just said, you know, I'm gonna come out here and I'm gonna just let it all hang out, man. This is my one and only chance to become heavyweight champion, and I'm going up against, you know, the most popular guy in the sport at the time. You know, hey, let's do it, man. I got nothing to lose here, you know. And he went out there, and I mean, he did put on a good show. Now, I believe Tyson ended up dropping Douglas later in that fight. I was trying to think what round he knocked him down. 8th round, yeah. Douglas went down in the 8th round. It was a nice short uppercut. Tyson landed a good right uppercut. One of those, you know, classic Tyson uppercuts. He slipped a jab from Douglas, and Douglas tried to put the hand back out there. That same hand that he jabbed with. Tyson went right underneath it and landed a beautiful right uppercut. And you know, I remember after the aftermath of the fight, Don King was complaining about how the count was too long, and you know, Douglas was knocked out, but the referee had a long count for him. But let me tell you guys something, man. Douglas did a smart thing there, because he used all 9 seconds or 9.5 seconds of that count to regain his legs and his head, clear the cobwebs, and get back up. Now, fortunately, again for Douglas, the round was just about to end. So by the time he ended up getting up and the referee called action again, you know, the bell had rang. Tyson didn't even have a chance to, you know, throw any leather until the next round. So, you know, Douglas really did catch a break there. As far as it being a long count, you know, hey, I mean, Don King might have had a case, you know. But hey, it is what it is, you know. A couple rounds later, Douglas came out, and I mean, he really just started putting some leather on Tyson, landing some nice combinations. You know, landing that jab, especially that big long jab of his, long right hand coming after it, swelled Tyson up pretty bad through the mid rounds, and then in that 10th round, man, he set Tyson up for a beautiful right uppercut. I mean, he threw about 6 jabs in a row. I mean, they weren't, you know, good stiff jabs. They were like real pity pat light jabs, but he was blinding him with that jab is what he was doing. And I mean, he threw that thing from the ground up, and I mean, I'm surprised Tyson's head was on his shoulders after he landed that uppercut. I mean, it was just a phenomenal uppercut that he landed on Tyson. And the way Tyson went down, I mean, the guy, it was just so strong. I mean, he got hit with that huge uppercut, and he was like still on his feet. You could tell he was rocked. And I mean, he just went down like a tree in the forest. You know, I mean, just real slowly. He was just tilting, and then on the way down, Douglas just straight two-pieced him again on the way down. And I mean, he fell, and that mouthpiece popped out of his mouth. And he was just, I mean, you could see he was out of it, man. He got up on all fours and was looking for that mouthpiece, you know. I think he spent a little too much time looking for it. Ended up finding it and putting it back in his mouth, and, you know, the referee, I think, made the right call, man. Tyson was badly hurt then, and, you know, that's history right there, man. Douglas became the heavyweight champion of the world as a 42-1 underdog. Unbelievable. Like I said, as far as the aftermath goes, I mean, we know what happened with Tyson. Tyson ended up fighting, I think, maybe 4 times or so after the loss to Douglas. Then he ended up going to prison. We all know what happened to Tyson then. As far as Buster Douglas goes, he ended up fighting Evander Holyfield next, who is my favorite heavyweight of all time. And let me tell you guys something, man. Holyfield back then, I believe he was right in line to get a shot at Tyson if he would have took care of business here with Douglas. Now, let me tell you guys something, man. And I don't care. You guys call me a fanboy or whatever. I don't care. But I personally believe that Douglas did him a favor in a way, because I think Holyfield would have annihilated Mike Tyson back then. That version of Holyfield, because the version of Holyfield that did beat him 5 years later was still pretty damn good. But this one was even better, in my opinion. You know, a 1990 version of Evander Holyfield, I think, gets Tyson out of there in less than 6 rounds, in my opinion. You know, and not to compare Tyson to Douglas, but we saw what he did to Douglas, you know, in the match that he had against Douglas. He got him out of there in 3, and it was, you know, really no sweat. But, you know, we'll never know. What we do know is that Holyfield did end up beating him in 96, and then 97, we know what happened there with the ear biting incident. But, you know, Holyfield is my boy, man. He's been involved in some of the most bizarre cases in boxing, you know. But you know, I just wanted to talk about this fight here. It was a, you know, historical night. Today is the 25-year anniversary for it, and you know, hey, hats off to Douglas, man. You had your 15 minutes of fame. You made a lot of money, and you knocked out Mike Tyson, man. You were the big underdog. So anyway, if anybody has any special memories and you want to, you know, drop some comments of this fight, let me know. But I'm getting ready to cut it here, man. G-Funk.